Simple math and history says that if an NFL team starts out 3-0, they'll make the playoffs. But there's a reason that the NFL regular season schedule is 16 games long. Plenty of time for a 3-0 team to unravel. Just ask 10 of the most talented teams in NFL history who fell apart when they looked destined for something special. I'm Justin Fraction, and today we present 10 NFL teams who went 3-0 and still missed the playoffs. And a big shout out to Charlie Schlenhardt for suggesting this idea. We hope you enjoyed it, and if you do, leave your ideas down below for more cool videos every single day for the rest of our lives. Well, your life, not mine. I'm going on vacation one day. I'm going to have myself a vacation for the first time in 4 years. Number 10, 2016 Baltimore Ravens. After a letdown 2015 season, the Baltimore Ravens looked like they were back with a vengeance. Quarterback Joe Flacco played considerably well after an injury-filled 2015 season, and the Baltimore defense was back to its swagger-like form. The Ravens beat the crappy Bills, Browns, and Jaguars to start out 3-0, showing all the makings of a Super Bowl contender. Only it didn't pan out that way. Baltimore lost its next 4 games, all by 8 points or less, after sitting pretty at 7-5. Injuries started to pile up. The Ravens lost 3 of their final 4 games to finish 8-8, thus missing the playoffs. The final dagger was on Christmas Day in Week 16 when the Pittsburgh Steelers beat them on a late Antonio Brown touchdown to seal the AFC North. Number 9, 2014 Philadelphia Eagles. Almost said Eagles. It's that Pittsburgh East coming out of me. Eagles. John Eagles. I left, but it's still inside. Nick Foles came off the bench and had quite the 2013 season under new head coach Chip Kelly. The Eagles came out of nowhere to win the NFC East that year, so big things were expected in year 2. Foles didn't miss a single beat, and the Eagles won their first 3 games, scoring at least 30 points in each. The offense was rolling, and they seemed poised for a deep playoff run. But Foles broke his collarbone in Week 9 against the Houston Texans, ending his season and forcing Mark Sanchez to take over for the remainder of the year. Sanchez played mediocre enough to help Philly sit at 9-3 entering Week 14, but the Eagles lost 3 games in a row, including 2 divisional games versus Dallas and Washington. The Cowboys clinched the NFC East in Week 16, and the Eagles were eliminated from the playoffs. It was one of those years when a solid 10-6 record just wasn't enough to make the postseason. There was a lot of parity in the NFC that year. Number 8, 2016 Denver Broncos. The Denver Broncos entered 2016 as the defending champions, and they did a fine job ignoring the infamous Super Bowl hangover early on. Behind one of the league's best defenses, Denver jumped out to a 4-0 start, and the playoffs looked like a gimme. After dropping to 4-2, Denver got back on track and sat at 7-3 with 6 games left to go. But the offense led by quarterback Trevor Siemian began to fall apart in the final stretch. Denver's defense kept them in games, but the offense betrayed them. They blew a big home game versus the Kansas City Chiefs and lost 3 of their final 4 games, missing the playoffs for the first time in 6 years. Sometimes those Super Bowl hangovers don't come along until later on in the season, and the 2016 Broncos learned this. Number 7, 2015 Atlanta Falcons. The Falcons had missed the postseason in back-to-back years for the first time in the Matt Ryan era, but big things were expected when Seattle defensive coordinator Dan Quinn came aboard as the new head coach. Quinn quickly took the NFL's worst defense from 2014 and turned it into a formidable unit. Matt Ryan and Julio Jones remained a potent quarterback-wide receiver duo, and the Falcons jumped out to a beautiful 5-0 start. Then a collapse almost as big as the one from Super Bowl 51 happened. Ryan regressed big time in the second half. The Falcons endured a 6-game losing streak mid-season. Atlanta wound up winning just 3 of their final 11 games, finishing 8-8 and missing the playoffs for a 3rd year straight. On the bright side, they did spoil the Carolina Panthers' perfect season bid in Week 16 with a 20-13 victory, so there's that. Number 6, 2008 Dallas Cowboys. A year after finishing with 13 wins and the top seed in the NFC, the Dallas Cowboys were a trendy pick to win it all in the 2008 season. When the Cowboys traded for Detroit Lions standout wide receiver Roy Williams in 2008, it only fueled their chances of winning another Super Bowl, or so we thought. Dallas's high-powered offense paced them to a 3-0 start to the season. But things began to unravel once quarterback Tony Romo suffered a broken right pinky that forced him to miss a couple of games. Dallas lost 3 of their final 4 games to miss the playoffs. It was highlighted by an ugly 44-6 road loss against the Eagles in Week 17, a game in which the winner would go to the postseason. The 2008 Cowboys are widely considered one of the biggest disappointments ever. Number 5, 1978 Washington Redskins. Before the Redskins became a dynasty in the 80s and early 90s, the fans in D.C. had to endure quite the disappointment. The 78 Redskins jumped out to a 6-0 start led by quarterback Joe Theismann and running back John Riggins. But the Redskins somehow fell apart entirely, losing 8 of their final 10 games. They closed out what was once a promising season with a 5-game losing streak, and 3 of those losses were in blowout fashion. Number 4, 2009 New York Giants. The Giants won Super Bowl 42 2 years earlier. They followed it up with the best record in the NFC. So yeah, things were quite exciting entering the 2009 season. The Giants lived up to the early hype, pummeling their opponents and winning their first 5 games. But the Giants' next 4 games were against teams that would make the playoffs that year, including the eventual Super Bowl champion, the New Orleans Saints. The G-men lost all 4 of those contests to fall to 5-4. The Giants couldn't recover, losing 3 of their last 4 games to miss the playoffs altogether, an 8-8 record after a 5-0 start. It was quite the unraveling, to say the least. Number 3, 1996 Kansas City Chiefs. Led by world-class running back Marcus Allen, linebacker Derek Thomas, and head coach Marty Schottenheimer, the 96 Chiefs were a popular pick to win the Super Bowl. They had made the playoffs every year since 1990, after all. The Chiefs won their first 4 games of the season and looked like the championship contender everyone had envisioned. But they lost 3 of their next 4 games and eventually stood at 8-3 heading into the final 5 games. You can guess the rest. Kansas City lost 4 of their final 5 games, including the last 3, to finish 9-7 and miss the playoffs. They were blown out in 3 of those last 4 losses, and it cost them the chance to win their first Super Bowl in nearly 30 years. Number 2, 2009 Denver Broncos. The Broncos hired New England Patriots offensive coordinator Josh McDaniels as head coach, firing 2-time Super Bowl winning head coach Mike Shanahan after the 2008 season. Denver also added future Hall of Fame safety Brian Dawkins in the offseason, and with Kyle Orton as their new starting QB, expectations were through the roof in the Mile High City. Denver rolled through their first 6 games, including big wins against the Cowboys as well as McDaniels' former team, the Pats. The Broncos began to unravel and lost their next 4 games. No need to worry, they won the next 2 and stood pretty at 8-4. But yeah, Denver went ahead and lost their last 4 games, losing by 20 points at home in the finale to the Chiefs. They finished 8-8 and missed the postseason. A mile-high collapse for the ages. And number 1, 2003 Minnesota Vikings. Quarterback Dante Culpepper, wide receiver Randy Moss. 4 Pro Bowlers on the roster. What could go wrong for the Minnesota Vikings, who cruised to their first 6 games of the season behind an offensive machine? We forgot, it's the Vikings. The true champions were squandering away all these games. The Vikings lost their next 4 games and stood at 6-4. They just needed to beat the lowly Arizona Cardinals in Week 17 to finish 10-6 and thus clinch a playoff spot. Nope. Minnesota surrendered a last-second Hail Mary, losing the game, finishing 9-7 and thus missing the playoffs. In a season in which they looked primed for a big playoff run ended, just like that. Classic Vikings, to put it mildly. What other NFL teams went 3-0 and still missed the playoffs? Let us know your thoughts in the comment section down below. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. We'll see you guys next time.